Hello.
Hello, hello.
Hello,
Hi,
everyone.
Bu.
Hello, Justin.
Hello, everybody. It's such a pleasure to be here. Hello, Vietnam.
Halo, benar.
Hai, Pak Abi. Selamat malam.
Abi.
Selamat malam
Selamat
semua.
malam semua.
Halo,
Linda. Halo, Linda. Halo, Jackie.
Halo, Pak.
Hello.
Halo, Dila.
Okay. I'm going to mute everybody so that we can start soon. But then I may not be able to unmute.
Okay.
1 minute. 1 minute, Bu. Let me
Right.
get on this.
Halo, Dila.
Halo Tante, apa kabar?
Baik. Lagi makan durian.
Aduh asik.
Main, main.
Budila, are you unmuted?
Uh,
I'm unmuted.
no,
You. I can hear you. We can hear you. Justin, yeah, we can hear you.
Hello.
And Justin. Yes.
I'm not mute.
I just unmuted you.
Okay.
Okay. Should we start now?
Sure.
All right. Should we start?
Halo.
Yeah.
Ya. Selamat malam semuanya. Terima kasih udah ikut bergabung di sesi malam ini. Malam ini kita tamu kami Justin Mott. He's mungkin Budila will introduce Justin a bit more.
Yeah.
Kindly mute yourself, and if you have any questions, please share on the chat box. We will address it. The session is being recorded, and we will upload it in the Leica Store Jakarta Facebook, which you can download in the next day or so. So thank you, Justin, for your time. Thank you, Budila, for your time to help us with this session.
Not at all.
Please, you can start now. Thank you. Enjoy, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. So everyone can hear me right now, right?
I can.
Yeah. Okay. How about the rest? All right. Good evening, everyone. It's very nice to be here with Justin Mott, who is going to be our guest star this evening. And I don't know whether all of you knows who Justin is or what he has done in his photojournalism career. But I'd like to talk a little bit of who Justin is. So Justin is an award-winning photojournalist, and he is American, and he is based in Vietnam. And I think he has been living in Vietnam since 2007. Is that correct, Justin?
Correct.
Right. Okay. And his work has been featured in all those prestigious publications like the New York Times, National Geographic, the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, Time Magazine, Forbes, and all those big names. So for 5 years in his life, he was also a TV host in a photography reality program called Face Off. And but apparently it's no longer the program is finished. After 5 years, Justin thinks enough is enough. Anyway, so Justin is also an avid animal advocate, animal welfare advocate, which is really nice for me, especially since I also like that. recently, which is like 2018, he started to switch his, probably not really switch his interest. I'm sure the animals has always been in his interest, but basically he's now concentrating or focusing his work of wildlife conservation and wildlife welfare and conservation journalism. So that's a little bit about Justin. And so currently he is working on his personal project, which is self-funded. And this is a long-term project. And the title is Kindred Guardians, which basically he is, he is focusing, or he's trying to depict the, the relationship between these animals and their helpers or their caretakers, and these people who have dedicated themselves in taking care of these animals. And what he's going to show us this evening is shot in 6 different countries, and they are all 6 different animals with their own issues. So Justin, please, if you would like to introduce yourself and elaborate a little bit more about your career, please do.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thank you, Dilla, and thank you, Leica Indonesia. I really appreciate everyone joining me today. I appreciate you taking time on a Tuesday night to join me and listen to me talk about my work as a photographer. So it's exciting. I've always had a passion for Indonesia. I started my career in Vietnam, but I also did a lot of assignments in Indonesia for the New York Times through the years and other publications. So my career is quite a different one. I have a strange arc as a photographer, in my career path. It's been quite strange the way I've got to where I am and how I started. I started in San Francisco. I'm 42 years old. I started in my late 20s studying photojournalism at San Francisco State. And I was fascinated with working for US publications at the time because that's kind of all I knew living there. And I always wanted to work for the New York Times. And about a year before I graduated university, I moved out to Vietnam to just sort of experiment and work on personal projects and sort of find my way as a photographer. And long story short, I never really left Vietnam. I found some stories I was interested in. I started doing my own personal documentary work, which led to doing assignment work for the New York Times. That was who I did most of my work for in the beginning of my career. My first major cover was for the New York Times and a story on palm oil plantations in Malaysia. And that really launched my career and opened up a lot of doors. But through the years, journalism is a tough industry to be in. Being a freelancer based in Vietnam, working in Southeast Asia, was tough to really get my career started. So I also did wedding photography. I also did commercial photography. You name it with photography I did. I also hosted a TV show for 5 years called Photo Face Off, sponsored by Canon for a while, but I'm now a Leica person, so I've switched gears completely. But recently, after all those years, I fell in love with photography, doing documentary work, doing personal projects. But about 10 years went by doing my television show, doing my commercial work, running my production company with my wife, where we do a lot of video production and commercial photography for hotels. But really my heart and my passion was always journalism. I've always had a love and interest in wildlife. And so about a year ago, I had one of those moments as I turned 40, I started to think about my career, my legacy, and what kind of projects I wanted to be known for and what I wanted to do with the next decade of my life, which some pretty deep thoughts and asked myself some pretty tough questions. And I'd always wanted to do stories about wildlife. I'm not a wildlife photographer. I have no interest in taking, sort of those classic wildlife pictures. I respect photographers that do, but I've always been a documentary photographer in my roots, and even that shows up in all my other work as well. I like to tell stories even in my commercial work and my wedding work. But something was missing in my career. I missed. By doing my personal projects led to a lot of work, but I missed doing those projects for 10 years. I missed having something I was truly passionate about. So a year ago, I launched Kindred Guardians, and I launched it by trying to find a story that was interesting to me, related to. I wanted something big to start with, so I was looking for something, with not necessarily a big animal, but it turned out to be a big animal. So I started my story about the last northern white rhinos, and that was in Kenya. I don't know if we want to show the pictures as we go along, but my first project was here. I launched this as a pilot project. I said, listen, I'm going to do one chapter of this and see where it goes. But something told me right when I started this project that this is going to be what I'm going to be working on moving forward into my 40s and hopefully into my 50s. I've had a passion for animals. I've always been inspired by people who dedicate their lives to helping animals. And for me, I wanted to tell their stories. And I thought, oh, this is also a project I could grow into. While I'm interested in this one story here, there's a million stories out there like that of people that really dedicate their entire lives to helping animals in all sorts of different situations. So a lot of the stories are related to conservation, but some are just related to people that have a warm heart for animals, as well as you'll see a story about street dogs as well. So this was the first project. This was in Kenya at Old Pajeta Conservancy, and this is a fascinating story. This is a story about the caretakers and the rangers and the last 2 northern white rhinos left in the world. I mean, let that sink in for a minute. There's only 2 of these rhinos left in the world. They're both female. I had saw National Geographic did a piece about when the last male died. I thought that story was impactful. I think as a photographer, some people might say, well, oh, someone's already done that story. But for me, I felt, listen, this is my, for me, I can get the story out locally in Vietnam. I wanted to get the story out. Vietnam, I wanted to get out to my audience and to the world. And I thought, well, this would be a great way to launch my project. It's such an impactful story. It shows kind of what we're doing to the world. I also did have this connection with rhinos. About 5 years earlier, I'd done a story for Time magazine about rhino horn consumption in Vietnam. I went undercover to photograph some of the illegal wildlife trade in Vietnam. And so, funny enough, the first time I actually touched and was around a rhino horn, it was a severed rhino. And the next time I saw a rhino horn, it was attached to one of 2 remaining in the world. So it was quite a powerful moment for me and a great way for me to launch this project. And, as you'll see, I've done 6 more chapters, and once this pandemic is over, hopefully soon, I'll be able to do more. So this story here, you can see these caretakers. They're in central Kenya. If you want to sort of scroll through some of the images, this project, while the project works as a whole of all these different stories, I like to separate it into different chapters. So, I'm spending about a week and sometimes 2 weeks. It depends on the budget that I have. As Dilla mentioned, my project is self-funded. I pay for this project based, from my commercial photography that I do, from the hotel work that I do. And I find these stories by my own research in the beginning. And now, as time has gone on, I have a lot of people referring these projects to me. Some people do ask about, these shots. You have the people rather close to the animals, and it's important for me to know, and it's important for you guys to know and it's important for my captions to make sure that this isn't normal. I don't recommend that, people aren't getting close to these animals in wildlife, but these 2 animals have lived in captivity their whole life. So when I do a story, the way I shoot, I'm shooting with a Leica M10D, which is a camera without a screen, which I did because I wanted to slow down in my photography, but I also like to get close to my subjects, and I need to get close, which sounds funny when it comes to wildlife, but it's important to me because I want to show these bonds. So I look for stories where people get close to animals, but stories that they also get close to animals ethically. So if it makes sense, since these animals have been in captivity their whole lives, and these caretakers, in this story in particular, they spend more time with these rhinos than they do their own families. They spend 21 days a month looking after the rhinos, protecting them from poachers, looking after them. And then they spend 6 days with their family. So they actually see these rhinos more than their family. So this to me was a big start for my project. It got a lot of exposure. It ran in the Washington Post, and then it led Washington Post to do a series started to feature my project and interview me about my project. National Geographic Portugal has also interviewed me about the project and featured it. And Greenpeace has been interested in the project. So this was really, for me, even though I was already established as a photographer in some ways and had my connections in the editorial world, this was a new field for me. I didn't have a lot of pictures of wildlife before, and I didn't have these kind of stories in my portfolio. So luckily for me, this project was, I had great access. I worked hard to get great access. It took a lot of convincing. Dylan and I had talked earlier about that. People would say like, well, is it hard because you're not going there saying you're working for a publication, which I would never do. I'm not. So I'm doing this in my own project. They have to trust me personally. A lot of these people don't know me personally. And so it takes a lot of time to convince people, phone conversations, WhatsApp, a bunch of emails. You have to be persistent, but eventually they did trust me, and it led to a great relationship. And I've even been back there to cover one of the procedures they had for the rhinos, which I won't go into now, but you can see it on my website as well. This right here picture is Peter. If you go back one, sorry, this is the last picture for the rhino series, to the grave one. If you want to skip forward one, that's Peter, the next picture, Peter, oh, sorry, if you go forward to the graveyard picture. One more forward. Anyway, the picture at the graveyard is Peter visiting Sudan, which is also the name of a country, but Sudan is the last male northern white rhino that passed away in 2018, and you know, making the situation for the northern white rhinos quite grim. There's still hope. They're still trying. There's a biorescue project in Opajeta and the Kenya Wildlife Service. They're still trying artificial insemination with the rhinos. I was there to cover the project. They're trying it every few months. It's quite complicated, very expensive, and it's a long shot, but they're still trying to save the species. But it was a very impactful moment for me to be there to do this story and to launch my project. And then so from there, I looked for more projects that show that bond between people and animals. If you skip forward, this is a story about, her name is Bam, and she's in Malaysia, and she looks after gibbons. She's a former wildlife ranger living in Indonesia. She had a lot of problems with the government there. She didn't like the way the wildlife rangers were looking after the gibbons. She started to take them in on her own. She left the wildlife department and started her own sanctuary illegally in the beginning, and now it's legal. But when I was there, this was an illegal operation, so we had to sort of not post any pictures while I was there, not talk about the location. She's had her life threatened. These are the kind of people that really inspire me. These are the kind of people whose stories I want to get out there. She rescues gibbons from the pet trade in Malaysia. It's quite a problem with celebrities and other people that want to have gibbons as pets because they want to dress them up and put them on Instagram. It was quite a moral dilemma doing the story too, because I wanted to show the pictures of her getting close to the gibbons, because she does get close to the gibbons every day, but I also don't want to give people the wrong impression about what her life is like. The only reason she's getting close to these gibbons is because after they're rescued, they need to be hand-fed. She needs to drive them to she has a small jungle school that she set up. The positive side about Bam is she went to court after a shift in government in Malaysia in the last couple of years, and this past year she got approval for her gibbon rehabilitation center. And you know, she still had her life threatened by poachers and wildlife traders, but she's amazing. She's dedicated her life to this, and she sort of epitomizes what this project is all about. Another thing people ask me about the project is, yes, I do fund it myself, and I also give the images to all the people that I photograph. Some are individuals, some are larger organizations. That's part of my trade. I always feel like photographers deserve to get paid for the work, and I understand that, but this isn't that kind of project. This is me asking them to go there and tell their story. So I give them a series of images. I hope those images can help tell the story and the work that they do. And then afterwards, I do pitch the stories to different publications that I've worked with before. But that's the ultimate goal is not to make money off of this. I lose money off it. If I can get my expenses paid, that's great. But that I don't pick projects based on that. I pick projects based on the people and the connection they have with animals. And it's been great. It's not for everyone. I think it takes to a certain point in your career to have that freedom, but I've worked for it for so long, and I take on a lot of jobs that I don't always necessarily want to do commercially, so I can fund these kind of projects. So yeah, each project is different. People ask me, how many days do I spend there? It depends on time and budget again. This is about 4 days with Bam in the jungle, about 4 hours outside of Kuala Lumpur. The rhino story, the first visit was about 1 to 2 weeks, somewhere between 1 and 2 weeks. And then I've been also back since. And some projects I only have a couple days. You know, I push for as many days as I can that fit with my budget, because the more time I'm with these people, I'm shooting this pure documentary, so I'm asking them for full days. I'm spending full days with them from you know, sun up to sundown. I ask them if I can crash at their facilities if they're in a remote place. And it's demanding. People, you know, it takes a lot for people to sort of let me into their lives, but that's what I need. I need to spend this time shadowing. The first couple of days I don't always get what I need. It's, you know, day 3, day 4, day 5, when they really start to open up and I start to see things a little bit differently. But again, that's the whole idea of this project for me, is to really slow down in my photography. All the assignments I've done over 100 assignments for the New York Times and different publications as well, but I never had time to really slow down in my work and to work on my craft. And that's really what a personal project is all about. It's spending time to work on your skills as a storyteller, as a visual storyteller. And that's what this project has been for me. The next project here is in Samui. This is the Soy Dog Foundation, and this is a great example of, like, when you go into a story, you don't always know what you're going to get, and to be open. When I first went to the Soy Dog Foundation, they are an organization I've heard wonderful things about through the years, based in Phuket. Soy means street and dog means dog, so they take care of street dogs in Phuket, but they look after street dogs throughout throughout Thailand, and they're also trying to stop the consumption of dog meat in countries like Vietnam and China, because a lot of the street dogs are actually taken from Thailand and shipped across through Laos and into Vietnam and used, sold for the dog meat market. They've done wonderful things with that, and to try to stop that, and working with the Vietnamese government, trying to work with the Chinese government. And they also do rehabilitation for dogs that are hit by cars, dogs that are injured on the streets. They do de-sterilization for dogs. So many departments. But when I first went through it, I thought I'd tell the story of the Soy Dog Foundation as a whole. And then they told me about this one elderly man who looks after the dogs. And he was a very nice guy. But when I went there and followed him around, I noticed that he volunteers his time. But most of his time was picking up poop. Sorry for the word, but there's not a lot of great photos of dogs picking up poop. But I stumbled upon this tiny little room where they do physical therapy. And I thought it was quite amazing. So I spent about 3 days with these 2 physical therapists that work there. They have this hydrotherapy department where they take dogs that have injured hips, that were hit by cars. Some of them were stabbed by humans, and they teach them how to walk again. What an amazing job and amazing work that these people do. So that was a very powerful story for me. And again, most of the stories do have a conservation element, but this was just more of an animal element and a love for animal element, which is also part of my project. So I was inspired by these people. I spent about 5 days there. They were welcoming me in with open arms. But again, for you photographers out there, it does take time to build trust. The first day, they weren't so cool with me being in the vet unit in this area. They said, oh, you can stop by for an hour. But once you explain to people, you make them comfortable with you, and you make them used to you being around all day, and you're just sort of transparent with them. That's what I was. I was just, listen, I'm going to give you these images. I'm going to spend time, and I'm going to tell the story accurately. And people appreciated the honesty and the transparency, and they were very open to me. And so what I'm looking for when I'm telling these stories is just these little moments that show that connection. That is the spirit, and that is sort of what this project is all about. It's just highlighting people that spend their lives helping animals and looking for these little moments. Because I love these people, and in a lot of ways in my life, I hid from stories like this. I was a little bit of a coward for a long time in my career because I love animals. And living in Vietnam, I've seen some horrific things, at animal markets, and I even doing my story about the wildlife trade and going undercover and photographing rhino horn dealers. It was awful. It made me angry. It made me emotional, and I hid from that for a long time. And so for me, this was me getting back to something I care about, something I'm passionate about. I didn't want to hide from something I cared about, and I wanted to tell those stories. And so that was me really getting back to this. This next story was quite interesting. This was referred to me by a friend of mine. I mean, this is a nice thing about the way my project has sort of snowballed. It started with the Soy Dog Foundation, the Gibbon story, and the rhino story. And then I knew this woman who was following me during my project. She used to live in Vietnam. She used to work with organizations, WTG. She's a German NGO that does a lot of different work supporting foundations like this, which is, this is a sloth. And this is in Suriname, which is a small country. I could point to here for any of you who don't know where Suriname is. I know a lot of my American friends didn't know where Suriname was, but it's a small country in South America. It's one of the most densely forested countries in the world, if not the most densely forested. It's just north of Brazil. And this woman is, on the left is Monique Poole. She's a CNN hero. She has dedicated her life without any animal training at all. She just has a love and passion for animals. She became sort of, she's allowed people to say this, it sounds rude, but people call her the sloth lady, and she takes care of sloths for most of her life. A lot of sloths are now ending up in the city because of deforestation, and as the urbanization expands, the sloths don't have a lot of these homes, so she takes them when people find them in their backyard. They're in trees. There's 2-toed sloths and 3-toed sloths, and when they call and they find them in the tree, she'll go and catch them. She'll bring them and release them into a place that they can be free, or hopefully be free for a long period of time. So this story was great. I spent about 8 days with Monique. The challenging part about this story was Monique looks after sloths, but sloth rescues only happen, she told me, once a week, sometimes twice a week. So I had to get lucky and wait for the right timing. And luckily, while I was there, she did rescue 2 sloths, and she does have a sloth that lives close to her. She has a main office in Paramaribo in the city, and then she has a rehabilitation center and the release area about an hour outside the city. So this is Monique washing one sloth after he was captured. He was in someone's backyard. They didn't know what to do, so they called the sloth lady of Suriname. That's the title of this chapter. And she cleaned him, she checked on his health, and then 24 hours later, released him into the wild. The challenging part with Monique was she doesn't have a giant staff. She likes to do things very hands-on, and I shadowed her all day because when the calls come in, I have to be ready to go photograph her. The challenging part for me was I flew all the way to Suriname, which is a long flight from Vietnam, and once there was a rescued sloth that she needed to go capture, no one wanted to help her, and I had to help her. So I was trying to navigate photographing Monique at the same time. I'm there to be a documentary photographer, to be a photojournalist, and to tell the story. So it was a tough balance of trying to help and get the shots at the same time. But luckily I was able to get some shots to tell the story. So that's a little, all these chapters you can see on my website in full. Each chapter I tend to have about 25 to 30 images. I look for my stories for each chapter. I ask people for a commitment. I want people to look at my stories and my sequences for each chapter as their own separate little mini stories. And it's a lot. It's a lot to ask people to look at 25 to 30 images. Your average spread in a newspaper might be, 3 images, or a slideshow online, 10 images. But I'm looking for more long form. This project is a long form documentary, a long form visual storytelling. So, while we're only showing a couple of pictures here just for time, these stories are a lot more in depth and a lot longer. The next story is, this story I kind of fell into. They were quite hard to get access to. Sheldrick Foundation in Kenya, they do great things for orphaned elephants. A lot of elephants are orphaned. The parents were they're either neglected by the herd, or the elephants were killed. Parents were killed by poaching or trapped by snares. And they do a long process rehabilitating these elephants and getting them back into a herd. Sometimes it takes several years. It could take 5 years, even longer. They have this step one is they're centered just inside the city in Nairobi. The caretakers here, you see this guy sleeping and you're wondering, why is he sleeping with an elephant? I found this quite fascinating, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to do this story, because these caretakers, they rotate, but each elephant, they need that care. Elephants need to have someone around them at all times. So they feed them every few hours milk. So these guys spend the night sleeping in a small little bunk area with the elephants so that they feel, nurtured, and they feel the love that they need. Elephants are extremely intelligent animals. And so I was just fell in love with the work that they do. And even though they were difficult to get access to, and they only gave me 1 day in the beginning, I talked my way into 3 days after I got them comfortable with me, and they wanted me to pay to go there because they have so much press, and they get, they also get they have bad experience with photographers, which is sad, and with film crews. But once they knew that I was there with good intentions and that I wasn't trying to make money off of this, and so they didn't make me pay, and they let me stay there for a few days. And what a lovely organization this was. So there's a couple images. It's 3 days. I'd like to go back and do more of the story, but these are all natural moments. I just wait and I hang around. I wait for these little moments to happen. This is Julius. He's one of the head caretakers there. I call the story The Men in the Green Jackets because all these men, they hang around, they're on their phones, they have their coffee in the morning, and then they just watch the herd play in the national park in Nairobi all day. Then when they go back, they know their personalities, they interact with them, and they step back and interact with them again. But they keep a log of each elephant, and they send it out to their donors. It's such a fascinating and wonderful story to witness. I really enjoyed being there. This is the next story. Sorry.
Is this the Sheldrick Wildlife?
That was the Sheldrick Wildlife Trust, yeah. And
okay.
They do amazing things throughout Kenya. This is just one of their programs, is orphaned elephants, but that's what I decided to focus on. It's hard because I try not to repeat countries and animals for my project, but I also, when I find a good story, or if it's in the same country and I'm already there, I can't help it. I have to go tell it. I mean, I haven't published this story yet. I haven't really even pitched it around, but I'm just promoting it now on my Instagram. And that's another thing I do. So for each project, I do about a month where I post 1 picture a day from the story. I tag them. We try to get as much awareness within my community. And now as I've done this project, I've had my community build up. My following online has become much more related to the wildlife and conservation industry, which has been fun to organically build. It's a slow process, but it's been fun to connect with all these people. And then also I can filter these stories too, which is important to me. I mean, I'm only a year into this field of work, so I'm by no means any expert. So I have a great group of people that I can rely on to talk to and say, oh, is this organization doing the right thing? Are they just doing it for money, or are they really helping animals? And is it okay for this person to get this close to this animal in this situation? And if so, how should I caption that? So it's a constant dialogue. It's a constant learning process for me. And some stories sound great, and I'd love to go do them. But if they're not, done ethically, or people tell me they're not the right story, then I stay away from them. Because I hope to turn this into a book in about another year, maybe 2 years with the delay. And then I'd like to do another volume after that. I've never found something I'm more interested in photography my entire life. I love all photography, as you can see by my career. And if you look me up online, you can see I do all sorts of things, but this is truly, really where my heart is. I love animals, and I admire, and I'm passionate about people that spend their lives looking after animals. So this project was like, it was a perfect match for me. It's sad it took me 10 years to find it, but I think as a photographer, you spend your whole life looking for these different careers, and you're lucky, I mean, different projects, and you're lucky if you can find something that you can keep growing into. You know, some people might spend a year, but this is the kind of project I can do for the rest of my life, I hope. The next story was right here in Vietnam. This happened just before COVID-19 came out, and there was a lot of connections to wildlife markets and wet markets, and even pangolins to the disease. And there's a great organization about 2 hours from my house in Hanoi called Save Vietnam's Wildlife. This, again, the same woman that you saw the organization WTG, they're in Germany, their organization also sponsors this place. They take care of rescued pangolins. These are pangolins. A lot of people don't know what pangolins are. They're nocturnal mammals. They're considered the most trafficked mammal in the world. I did a story for CNN years ago. Why they traffic them. It's not for pets. They take the scales, they boil them, and they use them for traditional medicine. I should have discussed that a little bit in the rhino horn trade too. Unfortunately, Vietnam and China are sort of the biggest consumers of this. Pangolins are about to go, people worry they'll be extinct very shortly. Every species of pangolin is endangered or critically endangered. So the pangolin meat sells for quite a bit, and the pangolin scales boiled up sell for quite a bit. And now that the Asian pangolin is almost extinct, now people are hunting them in Africa. Now the African pangolin is going extinct on its way to Vietnam. So for traditional medicine, but in fact, the science shows that it doesn't do anything. The substance that their scales are made out of is the same as nails. So you're just the same as if you were boiling up your fingernails or your hair, which is keratin. So it's quite a sad plight that they've had. I hope with all the attention wildlife markets and wet markets are getting, wildlife markets are getting now, that, you know, some of these laws have been passed in Vietnam and in China. I hope they're enforced. I hope people stick to it. But this place has been around for a long time. They take in, whenever there's a bust by the police, they take in the rescued pangolins, they care for them, they quarantine them, they check for diseases. Unfortunately, pangolins are very temperamental, and they're nocturnal, and people, you know, when they're caught, they're scared. They die all the time in captivity, and people don't even, a lot of biologists don't even understand why, but they have a high rate of death when they're in captivity. Just when I was there, one of the pangolins, on the first day I was there, that hadn't shown himself for a couple of days, and they dug around and found him, and he had died. It's quite sad, because, you know, these animals, again, they're trafficked, they're taken across borders. Sometimes they're sold live into restaurants for the meat, or sold live, and then the scales are taken apart and boiled and made into a soup. So quite a tragic fate they've had. I hope people can turn around. There's been a lot of attention on pangolins over the last couple of years, and I hope COVID-19 sort of sheds a stronger light on that, and I hope stricter laws are passed. But they've had quite a sad story. So this is my most recent story, and yeah, quite impactful for me. These guys take care of them every day to look after these pangolins, and again, though many of them die, and even if they're released back into the wild, it's really hard to ensure their safety. Even in national parks, the resources aren't great to protect them. You know, at Opajeta, the conservancy where the rhinos live, they're very well funded, and that's the difference. It's private, but they're very well funded, and they have armed guards, you know, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But even the guards for the rhinos, when I met with some of the rangers, I spent the night with them on patrol, and they had told me just in 2018 they shot and killed 3 poachers who shot at them. I mean, so it still does happen, even in a place that as heavily protected as that is. So it's the other thing I want people to understand when I do this kind of project and I do these stories, and there's a lot of people in the world that don't understand or don't have a love and compassion for animals. And as much as it's hard for me to digest that or understand that or empathize with that, because I do, you know, I would like to think that people do have sympathy for our fellow humans. And, you know, people like this man here who spends his life taking care of them, and how much effort he puts into this. But not just him. You look at the guards, you look at the caretakers for the rhinos, they risk their lives. I mean, these people have families. So even if you don't respect, you know, animals, which I hope you do, you know, respect people. And you know, when you're involved in this stuff and you purchase these things or you condone it, you're you're also supporting criminal organizations. You know, the illegal wildlife trade is a huge industry that you know, you're promoting criminal activity, not just in the animal world, but all sorts of stuff that are tied to a lot of things, human trafficking, drugs, and things like that. So when you support this kind of stuff, you're also supporting, you know, giant criminal organizations, and a lot of people and lives are ruined over that as well, not just animals. I think that might be the last image. I can't remember. You wanna?
Yeah.
Jack, is that the last one?
That might be, yeah. So that's the project up until now. I have a lot more projects, chapters for the project planned. Again, the way I have it is I have this separate stories, and those stories get published in different publications, but I have them all on my website, each chapter. And then in the end, I will make a fine edit of all of that and put it into a book, and hopefully raise some money for some of these great organizations that are out there and these wonderful people, and shed light and get their stories out there, because I admire them and they're heroes to me.
Okay.
Thank
So
you. Thank you, Justin.
thank you, Justin. I have a questions
Sure.
regarding the elephant, your elephant projects, because I noticed that you went to shoot at the Sheldrick Foundation, right? Which is very well known for being difficult or not easy to approach.
Yeah.
Isn't it? I was just wondering, because you did also the story of the rhinos, the two female rhinos, which also happened in Kenya, right? I mean, that foundations, it's the all Pejita, is it conservation?
Yes.
Yeah,
Correct.
and they also do elephants, if I'm not mistaken.
They have a giant conservation when they do some work, but it's they don't work with orphaned elephants. They don't have a program quite like this.
It's not in the same like the Sheldrick's Foundation.
No, it's not. And I didn't do the Sheldrick story until my second trip. The first trip I went there, I wasn't able to get access in time. I found out about them last minute. I didn't have the work to sort of show them, you know, who I am. But the second time, after this story was published in so many giant media outlets, I think they respect a little more. They were slow to get back to me. I think they've had some bad experience with photographers, which is unfortunate. You know, we have to take blame too. Some photographers, you know, go in, they might sign an agreement, but then sell the images later, and that's not what they agreed upon, or they might, you know, be pushing the caretakers to stand here, do this. That's what the guys told me when I was there. They're like, listen, we had a film crew and they were directing me the entire day. And I think they really liked my approach of just, hey, I'm going to hang around all day. I am going to be here all day, but don't worry about me. You know, the first day, the lady that, you know, approved me to go there, she didn't have to come out of the office. She didn't have any problems. The only thing I asked is that I could have a full day there. I wanted to be there at 5 a.m. I don't want to reenact things. It's not what I do. I think it's unethical. I wanted to be there when they woke up with these animals. And so I just asked, you know, I know the place opens at 7 or 8 o'clock, but can I come there at 5:30? You know, and I pushed hard for it. And she said, oh, listen, the first time, you know, people come here, you just spend a couple hours and it'll be fine. I said, that's not really what I'm looking for. I want to spend full days there. And I need to get these moments, and I need them to happen naturally. And the more time I'm there, the more likely they are to happen. So, you know, one day turned into 2 days, 2 days turned into 3 days. And I would have stayed even more and they would have let me, but I had already booked my flight back and had something else I had to do back in Vietnam. So, but it was a great start, you know, and I did earn their trust, and I did have to be very, very persistent to get access there. But I'm also very honest about what I'm looking for. Again, if they're only going to give me an hour, I'm not going to go. I'm not going to spend my money going that far, you know, and if I can't get the story, each chapter has to hold up to the other chapters. So I need the same level of access. And it's, some people say no, or some people don't get close to the animals, and that's fine too if they don't and the story doesn't work. You know, that's why it's a bunch of questions, and it's a pain in the butt for them when I'm doing the research for the story, but it saves me a headache later on. So I'm not traveling halfway around the world and then I only give me 2 hours, or they never interact with the animals. So I do a lot of research. I know what I'm looking for, exactly what I'm looking for. I ask for, you know, even some pictures, and I am very demanding on what I'm looking for access. And if they can't give it to me, I'm not mad at them. I totally respect that too. I understand. But if they can't, then I usually don't go.
Right. Maybe you can share it with us. The way you do this project, because this is a long term, and for those other photographers who might, the aspiring photographers who might want to do also a long term project.
Yeah, I mean, for me, personal projects are so important to your growth as a photographer. Even if you just did wedding photography, but you did a personal project and something else, you will learn so many things about your wedding photography that you might not just learn going on shoots. Because during your personal project time, you have time to fail as a photographer. You have time to experiment as a photographer. You can try different things with the way that you capture your story, the way you tell your story, the way you sequence your story. So anytime I've done a personal project, I've made the gains in my photography much more than I have doing anything else. Every time I'm on an assignment, I'm under the pressure, I'm under the clock. I have to deliver what I was paid to do. On these kind of stories, you know, if I give myself 8 days to be there, I can experiment for a day. I can experiment with my distance, you know, between my subject. I can experiment with, you know, I have more time to wait for these moments. I can be a lot more patient. I can experiment with portraits. There's so much I can do. And the growth that I've made as a photographer just this past year, even at my age, has been amazing. You know, I'm making growth, and I'm finding my identity, a new identity for the project, and even in my direction as a photographer. And the way I approach this is I really just look for great stories. It's been amazing. At first, I thought I'd be doing research in local newspapers, and I do a little bit of that. But now I'm finding Instagram has been a great tool for me. I see people who are posting. I see people who are passionate. People link me all the time. So it's a great community. I get private messages. If you guys have any great stories in Indonesia, you can link to me. Indonesia is definitely on my list for places I want to go to. I definitely need to do a story about orangutans. So if you know any great places and great people that do things related to orangutans, that would be wonderful. It's such an important story to tell. A lot of people have told it, but again, I want to do it my way and in this context of this project. So yeah, it's a lot of research. It's knowing exactly what I want, and that took time, you know, and that took growth, that took experience. But again, the way I'm doing it is most people are confused when I show up and they're like, wait a minute, where's all your long lenses? I mean, I have a Leica M10 and a Leica M10D. My M10 is just my backup camera. I use my M10D 90% of the time in a 35mm lens. So they're like, wait, you're a wildlife photographer? I'm like, no, I'm a wildlife photojournalist, which means that, you know, I'm telling these stories, and I'm looking to document stories, and I'm looking to get close. So people are always amazed by how minimalistic my kit is and how small my lenses are. But that's the thing, is I need these stories that have these intimate moments, and it all comes from research. And I do a lot of that by email, but like I said, I do a lot of it on social media as well.
Right. So now we have some questions here. So
Sure.
I should read it out loud to you from someone called David Kowijaya. He asked, when you are covering the story, have you ever met the poacher and in life-threatening situation?
That's a great question, and thank you for it. But I did the rangers that I followed at Opajeta, protecting the rhinos. They're not just protecting the rhinos that were in captivity; they're also protecting the whole conservation, which has elephants and has tigers and has leopards, a lot of animals that people are looking to poach. And those rangers, it also has wild rhinos as well. And those rangers that I met, yeah, it was amazing to hear their story. I mean, they're risking their life. They're out with these wild animals. They camp overnight in the park. They're patrolling. They're around tigers, hippos, elephants. I mean, these animals are dangerous to humans, you know, and they're animals that can kill you pretty easily. And then in addition to that, you know, they did tell me, yes, we did have a problem with poachers. And a year ago, one of the guys had shot 3 poachers. I wasn't there for that. That had happened a year. And since that death, since their team had killed those poachers in self-defense, they haven't had any incidences. But, you know, I talked to these guys, and I have done stories, you know, where I was in Vietnam of these people who I did have to pretend, and that was a little bit dangerous because I'm pretending to be a buyer and going undercover to photograph these dealers so I can show people that underworld of sort of the black market trade and animal trade, which is dark, and it's a criminal organization. So that is scary, but that's kind of part of the job, I guess.
Right. So second question is from Hikmashanti Larasati. She asked, which story do you like the most and why? And what obstacle did you face when you documenting that story?
Well, I would say it's going to be hard for a story to have a larger impact to me moving forward than the rhinos, because, you know, to witness, to be there firsthand, to meet these 2 rhinos and touch them and be there in person with them, the last two of a subspecies in the entire world, it was quite emotional for me. And it was also always been important to me because it's what kicked off this project for me. It's what kicked off a giant change and shift and a giant pivot in my career towards these kind of projects and these kind of stories. So it was a scary moment. It was one of those moments in life where, you put it's like that pit in your stomach because you're trying something new. It's my own money and this could fail and how's this going to work moving forward? But I've always found that those moments in your life that make you feel that way are some of the most memorable and most powerful moments in your life. So I was happy to make this big change, this big pivot. So the rhino story will always hold a special place for me. But all these stories are so important to me because all these people are so fascinating to me. I admire all of them and they all really inspire me. But this story, yeah, it was very impactful. I think that the biggest moment I remember was when I actually touched that rhino horn because, it was over 5 years before that I had actually held a severed rhino horn at the mafia, the wildlife trade guys' little lair in Hanoi where I actually held that severed horn, and I just felt so much anger and towards him, and I had to pretend to be friendly and photograph it and even try some of the rhino horn because I had to look like a buyer. So years later to meet this rhino in person and to see their plight, it was emotional. It's because to know why these animals are almost pushed to extinction is sad and it's gut-wrenching. It's hard to be around, but to know that people are still trying to save them and people still risking their lives was also inspiring to me.
Okay, right. So, I think you have another question from me.
Okay.
Because while I'm waiting for other people to raise another questions, it's this talking about rhinos. These two female, the last female white rhinos, right? That's what the last in the word, Fatu and Najin.
Yeah, northern white rhinos, correct? Yes.
And you mentioned earlier that, and also I've read that there is a program for the insemination, because
yes.
Otherwise then it's finished. I mean, for this species. So
correct.
Did you document that as well?
I did, yes, separately, and it'll work part of my project as well. And I went on my own money. They gave me great access. They only had one international photographer there for the first attempt at this, and I asked to come back for the second attempt. So there was 2 international photographers allowed, a lot more that wanted to come, but I had built some trust with them, and we had done some great programs together. I gave a talk in New York about the wildlife trade, about the rhino, the plight of the northern white rhinos. The story that I did was published in Paris Match, Washington Post, and then I had a bunch of other, the Greenpeace as well, did articles about my work and about the story. So, I built up some good credentials with them and some good trust. And I also used the images for them to donate. I donated some of the images as prints, and they were able to raise some money off of some of the work that I did. So we had built this trust up and they let me come back. It was quite complicated because they let me come in, but it wasn't just old Pagetta doing the procedure. They have a group of veterinarians that are coming from a zoo in Germany, and then the biorescue team, which is a sort of a group of biologists and veterinarians coming in from all different countries working on this. It's a quite unprecedented and complicated project. So there is still hope. I hope to continue working on this story as much as they'll let me come back, because most of my stories will probably be done after I go there. At least my story, my work there will be done. But this is the kind of story I feel like I'll probably keep telling and keep growing into, because it's so powerful, and it's such a microcosm of what's happening with conservation and the environment as a whole in the world.
Did you actually stay there, overnighting on the premises?
Yeah, they have. It's because people do go there for safaris. They have quite a luxury safari area that would be too expensive. But I stayed in they have a volunteer sort of area, which is very affordable, and I just stayed there. And every morning I asked them to help me rent a car. I rented a car and I drove. It's about 40 minutes, so I would drive every morning from my little tiny room. I could fit a bed to the gates of and I would just meet these guys when they started their day. I mean, and I'm still friends with these guys today. Peter here and Zechariah, we text each other a lot. They show me pictures of the rhinos. They check in, tell me how they're doing. We've become friends, and I'm trying to get Zechariah, the head caretaker. We tried to get him to New York. He didn't get a visa. This was last year. I was doing a talk there. I really wanted him to be there, and I would like to try to get him to Vietnam to give a talk about the plight of the northern white rhinos. He'd be a great person to talk to about.
All right, so we have another few more questions. One from Iskandar, and his question is, what is the most memorable moment for you with the larger than life wild animals?
I touched on this a little bit earlier, and I hate to go back and give the same answer, but really, I would be lying if I didn't say when I walked through the gate and I met Zachariah and he walked me over to see the two rhinos in person like that, and they were very careful and very cautious about getting close, and I had to really ease my way into it. But the moment where I actually was just present with them, being around this majestic animal that close, so many different feelings. Amazing to be that close to these rhinos, sad and emotional because of the situation they're in, and also such a big moment for me to begin my project personally, and so that was it, just to be that close to Fatu and Eugene the first time and see them and to pet them and to feel their even feel their breath, and feel them and scratch their hind legs where they showed me they like to be scratched. And when they allowed me close to them and without being spooked, it can be scary too. They're quite gigantic animals, and if they run you over, you're gonna get hurt. But the guys in there were very safe, and it's not something anyone can do, but they gave me fantastic access. And like I said, it took a little bit of time to earn the trust of the caretakers, to earn the trust of the organization, and to earn the trust of the animals. But I was able to get close and then sort of read their body language when it wasn't okay to get close, and try to limit my time, getting too close to them. But that was so powerful. That moment will stay with me forever. That's one of the most powerful moments in my life, never mind just my career as a photographer.
Right. So another question is this one is from Maggie. How did you arrive in the subject of your project? Usually, how long did your research go on before you finally choose a subject?
Yeah, Maggie, great question. Thank you. I've had this love for animals my entire life, and I had a bunch of assignments through my 10 years, even living in Vietnam, my first 10 years, a lot of animal stories that I kind of shied away from because I didn't think I had the heart or stomach to do it. I have photographed slaughterhouses, and that's really hard to be there. And that really had an impact on me. And then I was asked to do stories about bear bile for different magazines. It's another issue here. And I kind of stayed away from that because I thought my anger wouldn't make me a great a biased journalist. I didn't really feel comfortable with that. But then as I got older, I realized I'm just too drawn to this, and it just matters too much to me. And I need to face my cowardice and I need to do projects and stories that make me uneasy. Of course, a lot of these stories, the moments on there are happy, but the situation these animals in aren't. So I wanted to learn. I wanted to get back to personal projects because that's what I started my career, and that's what my passion is. So it was kind of a no-brainer for me. It's almost embarrassing that it took me 10 years to find this project because I've always loved animals. I've always cared, and I like the connection between humans and animals. So it just kind of happened one day. I think I had so many years between my TV show, my wedding business, my production business, and all my New York Times assignments. I never really had time to slow down and think. You can see even now I talk fast, but I never had time to think, slow down, and think about what I wanted in my career. And this was just a big moment. It was actually a funny moment, like to mention Leica, and no one asked me to do this, but it was a complete shift. I was like, listen, I want to change my gear. I don't want to take a bunch of gear around me anymore. I want to travel light. I want something simple. I started my career with a Leica actual M6 and a 35mm lens, and I always missed that feeling of just one camera, one lens in my hand, something that makes me move more and think more and slow down as a photographer. So I actually bought the Leica kit at the same time I started this project. And talk about researching the project is, for me, in the beginning, it was hard to get access. Research is a million stories, so it was I had to check I was looking for stories that had a bigger impact. So the rhino horn was quite interesting because it connects to Vietnam. I had the local ties here. It's also a bigger picture about poaching and the illegal wildlife trade. So that was very fascinating to me. But even just simple stories like this lady who looks after gibbons, it's a bigger issue in Malaysia, sure, but it won't get as much global attention. But I find all the stories different and unique, and I look for sort of any story that I can get close to the people, and that the people get close to the animals, again, in an ethical way, and these people that really go above and beyond. It's not these people that volunteer, it's these people that really dedicate their lives. And these people do, I do a lot of research about them. I ask them a lot of questions, probably more than they want to deal with. It's funny because like I'm the one I'm asking for access, but at the same time, I'm bothering them with a million questions to make sure that they're the right person for my project. So it's tricky, but I like to think I do it very politely and persistently.
Okay, thank you. There's questions from Jacqueline. Are the rescued animals, are they released or adopted afterwards?
It depends on the stories. So the dog story, for example, they have a lot of volunteers that come and walk the dogs, but the street dogs, if they're in good condition after they're healed and they can go out, and if they can't be adopted, a lot of them, their lives will actually be better than staying at the center. They'll be better back on the street in some cases. So they release them. If the animals can be adopted, then they will. If the animals are fixed up and healed, they'll give them the proper time and then released. The gibbons, Bam is working on developing a full-on rehabilitation center. She has one now, but she's working on a much bigger version of the one she has now, and she likes to eventually release them into the wild. It takes time. For the rhinos, no, those are 2 captive rhinos. They have to be protected. They have to be watched, and unfortunately, they've lived their whole life in captivity, and they will live out their life in captivity. But that's that situation. So it really depends on the animals. The integration for the elephants, yes, that's the whole point of the project. That's what Sheldrick does. It's a very long process. That's camp 1. Then they get reintroduced to the reintegration camp where they're introduced to a herd of elephants. So it takes time, but that's the ultimate goal for Sheldrick. They put a lot of time into getting these animals back into the wild. They do a bunch of programs, but their orphan elephant project is about that. The pangolins, if they can be released into the wild, then they are. It's just they have to find the right place for them to do, and they put tracking devices on them, but a lot of them are eventually captured and then killed as well. So it's quite a bad cycle for them and quite demoralizing for the people that look after them, but they're trying their best.
Okay. Bambang Wijaya from Yogyakarta asked you, which I think you already explained earlier, because his question is, do you also bring a long lens to the forest?
This is my longest lens. It's an old Leica 135. And that's my longest lens, but it's tiny. You can see even a 135 and a Leica is tiny. And I carry this lens. It's from the 70s around with me. I barely use it, but every once in a while with the sloths and the trees, it did come in handy. Most of the stories I do, though, I'm looking for stories, again, where people ethically get close to the animals they're looking after. So this is sloth rescue. I mean, she's releasing them back into the wild. So it makes sense for them to get close. So I do look for stories that are appropriate for my kit, and that's what I want. And those are the moments that I'm looking for. But every once in a while, I'll use that 135, but that's as long as I get. You know, it's a bummer. Sometimes when I was in Africa, you do see these giraffes off in the distance and wild rhinos, and you can't get close to them, but that's not what I'm there for. I'm there to do these stories. So I do miss some of those shots, but that's not the point of my project. Again, I'm not looking for those sort of wildlife shots that you see in classic wildlife photography you might see on Nat Geo. Again, I'm looking for stories, and I'm looking for intimate moments and the bond between people and animals.
Okay, Justin, back to the gibbon story. It's I remember you mentioned that it was the organization, or that woman had run this foundations illegally at the beginning, yes. And finally nowadays it becomes legal. So I just wonder, why was it illegal? In a sense, why didn't she legalize it at the first place?
Well, it took a lot of time, and I think the fact that she was working for the government, I think the government was losing face, and the fact that she had a better rehabilitation program than they had. While I was there, she was actually in court debating this. She was a former ranger. She was actually in a lawsuit with them for losing her job, which she thought was unjustly, and she won the case. She was also trying to get her licenses, which can be a lot of red tape to take care of these animals, but you know, she had worked hard. She had done proper training in a Copenhagen zoo to learn how to rehabilitate gibbons and release them into the wild. There was no formal training in a lot of the rangers. That's what she told me there. And luckily, when I was there, I was actually, I don't have the pictures here, but you can see them on my site. I was actually in court with her when it was basically postponed, but she was traveling all the way to Kuala Lumpur, hoping that she was going to get everything done over with, and the judge postponed it, and she was very emotional. But again, those are the moments that I want to be there for. I'm always asking questions when I'm there, as, you know, hey, what are you doing? If anything comes up, even some of these subjects, I'll say, I want to do the story in the next 6 months, but if you have something happening in the next couple of weeks, if I can, I'll come. Or if you think that something, I explain exactly what I'm looking for. I have a conversation with them on the telephone as well. And I say, if you think something out of the ordinary is happening in the next year or two, just keep me in mind. And I constantly remind them. I'm checking in with them every few months and saying, listen, if something comes up, if there was a big release or they were doing, if a big bust happened, you know, where they had all these penguins come in, please keep me in mind and I'll come and cover it if I can. So some of the stories I will enhance and some I will follow up with. And then some of them, the stories I have now for the future, I just have them sitting there waiting for moments to happen. You know, like the dolphin rescue project I want to work on in Indonesia as well. I'm waiting for them to give me approval because they might be doing a special release of the dolphins into the wild, so back into the ocean. So I'd like to be there for that. So if I can capture these big moments, then I try to time it that way. It just doesn't always work out that way, but I try to.
Yeah. So basically, the gibbons, this organization is the only gibbon rehabilitation center.
Yeah, as far as
for the whole Malaysia, is it?
Yeah, and as far as I know, I mean, the government does have a program, but the government actually turns to her quite a bit for the gibbons and says, okay, we had a rescue gibbon, they'll go to her. It's kind of the same with the sloth situation. A lot of people assume these governments in countries, oh, they must have a program to you know, the animals that people want to come see, but they don't. The sloth organization, the animal welfare center, they didn't even know who to turn to about sloths. They were starting to turn up because as the city expanded, they had these little forest fragments within the city, and the sloths, when they developed the land, they had nowhere to go, and they ended up in people's backyards, and people got freaked out. And then she took in one and helped one, and then she just became the sloth lady. She had no formal training. She had to go on YouTube. She had to ask, and sloths aren't an animal that there's a lot of research on, so she had to ask her sort of colleagues or people that have been doing this formally in Brazil and in Costa Rica. You know, there's only a few countries where they're native to ask them for help about how to rehabilitate them. And she has people volunteer that are veterinarians, but she's not a veterinarian. So yeah, a lot of these places are kind of like are grassroots, organically grown out of necessity because the governments aren't helping much in that department.
I see. And for the sloth, you also mentioned about having, there are two different types of sloth, the one with two-toed and the other one is toed, right? What's the difference between them? I mean, is there any other characteristic of the difference?
Yeah, well, one's nocturnal and the other one isn't. And so the sometimes I turn it around backwards. I believe three-toed sloths are let's pull up the sloth pictures just so I can show you actually the one. You can see too, the cuter sloth. This one looks a little bit more like Chewbacca. So this is the, I'm gonna have it backwards. I always confuse this, but I believe this is the two-toed sloth, and they're nocturnal. And so these are the ones she finds at nighttime in the trees, and they look a little more scary, and these are more likely to bite. They're not aggressive, but when you're trying to rip them down from a tree to put them in a cage, I mean, she does it as gently as she can, but it's hard to get them out of these positions. They have a good grip on the trees. So, and then the other sloths are a little bit cuter, and you might see them a little bit more in like Disney movies. This is the three-toed sloth. As you can see, they have the three toes there. The other one is a two-toed sloth. So this one is not nocturnal. And so you see them a little bit more abundantly because they're around during the day if you look up into the trees. They're very slow, they're very adorable animals, and yeah, they're losing their natural habitat to, you know, deforestation and even global warming. I mean, drought affects these animals. This one was quite sad. I found out about a month after that. This one, his name was Ostrich because it was found in the zoo next to in the capital city of Suriname, next to the ostrich area. He just sort of climbed in, so she named him Ostrich. He was released into the wild, but just outside their center. So once a month, he would basically come into the center, which you see here, and say hello and hang out. And he died shortly after this. He was dehydrated. They tested him. They gave him water, but it hadn't rained in a bit. There was a bit of a drought, and yeah, he passed away. It's sad. And this lady spent several years rehabilitating the sloth.
So when you do basically for all these photo shoots, there is nothing undercover, right? You do it with. Because you mentioned earlier that you did an undercover.
No, that was my journalism work. Whereas this, while I still consider this, you know, documentary work, this isn't really. and I still follow the same ethical guidelines as for journalists, but I'm not looking for those kind of stories as much. I'm looking for, if I find the right story that fits for the project, whether it was, might not be undercover, but if it was part of a law enforcement agency that let me go along with them when they do confiscations, I'd be open to that, because I look for all sorts of stories in different ways that people help animals. But no, this is more about an agreement. I let them know why I'm there. I let them, I want them to, I'm very transparent with them about what I'm looking for and hoping to get access. So yeah, I need to be very transparent if they're gonna let me spend a week with them or so.
Right, okay. So there's two more questions here. One sure. From Maggie. Would you recommend other fellow photographers to work on a long-term project?
Maggie, if I have one piece of advice for any photographer, it's to start a personal project. There's nothing that will make you grow more as a photographer. There's nothing that will make you enjoy photography more than working on a personal project. And even if you intend, it's not the greatest economically or financially to do, because a lot of times your personal projects don't make money. But the thing is, you have to look at it as an investment in yourself and your growth as a photographer and your growth as a storyteller. Like I kind of mentioned before, and I say a lot to people that I teach, and when I do my talks, is the amount of things that I learned doing a personal project really extended over into my commercial work. I mean, I still tell stories in my commercial work. I still look for the way I capture natural light. The way I learned how to do that is during my commercial work. I use my personal project to experiment with my photography, to grow as a photographer, and it's something you should constantly want to do in the beginning of your career, in the middle of the career, and at the end of your career. Now, I've been doing this for over a decade, and again, the growth that I've had in the past year have been more than I've had in the 5 to 10 years before that, because I've been working on this personal project. I allow myself time to think. When I'm working with an ad agency or working on a big shoot with models and a lot of things going on, or a client, I just have to focus on getting the shots that I know how to do. And yes, I can be creative, but I really have to deliver. Whereas this, I can really think about the story I'm trying to tell. And the other thing is, like, really, all this comes from the heart, and your best work that you're going to do is going to come from the heart. I mean, this is something I care about so much, something I get emotional about, and something that means the world to me. So I put everything I have into it. I still put everything I have into my commercial work too, but this is just different because this project's been so wonderful. My commercial work ends usually when I'm done toning the images and I deliver them to client. Whereas this project, it keeps going. Even before I do the research, then I'm doing the project. Then after I do the pictures, I'm editing them. I actually work with a separate editor that helps me edit the story, because I like another point of view. I always recommend that. And then I'm constantly in contact with these people, through the years, and they send me updates on what they're up to, and they ask, a lot of times they need the pictures again because they lost them, but it gives me a chance to catch up with them and see the work they're doing. And we stay in touch online, and it's a constant education for me, and it's a constant inspiration for me as well.
Right. Okay, I think we're nearly towards the end, because there's no more question, except there's one comment from Jerry, who happened to know my work as well. So Jerry says, I saw how different his gallery from you, Dila. That's what he said. You get close to the animal, he gets close to the human caretaker. So love both point of view, passionate. That's what he said.
Yeah, I've always been a photographer of people. I was trained that way as a photojournalist. You're always taught in my college. My professor always said, like, where's the person? Where's the person in the shot? I need that human element, and that's always stuck with me, and that's really helped define me as a photographer. It's not to say one's better than the other, but that's just for me and what I look for in my images and in my stories, is that connection and that human element.
Right. Okay. So I suppose we are nearing the end. Bernard?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Budila. Thank you, Justin. I think it's a very inspiring story for all of us. Very, obviously, a very passionate what you do. Thank you again for your time. Anything going forward, if there's anything you think we can help you with over here, projects that you want to cover, we'll definitely try our best.
If you want to cover orangutan, I can give you the access.
Yeah. Really? Oh, that would be wonderful. Wow. I will send you.
I did orangutan already, so then I know the contact.
Thank you. I know a lot of photographers don't like to share that kind of stuff, but I like to, and I like to be open about it. It's about trust. So I hope you trust the project and trust me, and I'll do it justice.
Exactly. And not only that, everyone have a different way of seeing things. You can shoot same subject. It's like your rhinos. Of course, we know that Amy Vitali does the same thing, but of course it's different what you did and what you do and what Amy does, right?
I hope so. I hope people see that. Yes.
Yes. So it can be the same place. You go to the same
Absolutely.
foundation.
And that's a good message to leave on, Dilla, too. Like, I think a lot of people are intimidated by doing stories by more famous photographers, and I don't think you have to be, because you can always put your spin on it. You can always reach a different audience than the other person did. And
Exactly.
even if you didn't do it classically as better, as good as them, or work for a biggest organization, you do it your way, you do it with your passion, and you find your outlet and your audience, and that's enough. Don't be intimidated by other photographers, because a lot of them like you to be, and they think, oh, they did the story, no one else can do it. Don't worry about that. Do it your way, do it from the heart, and that's all you need to do.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Budila. Thank you,
guys.
Justin. Thank you, everyone. Stay
Thank you,
healthy,
everyone.
stay safe. Yeah, keep in touch, Justin. Anything we can be of help, let us know. We'll be more
I
than glad
appreciate
to
I like to
do a
orangutans in Indonesia, so part 2, I'm ready.
Okay, thank you.
Alright.
Selamat malam
Thank you.
semuanya. Terima kasih. Bu Hermandari, Pak Abi, everybody. Pak Bambang, thank you very much from Jogja. Thank you. Good night, Justin. Thank you.
Have a good
Thank
day.
Thank you. Jacqueline, thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.